Okay, this is like the third or fourth attempt I've tried at getting this video done. The gremlins are out there. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, um, okay, this is probably why I'm doing this channel. Is just to get the great information that all of you are sending and sharing, and that's really my hope is that we're reading all the responses and getting something out of it, right? And maybe I'm just like the facilitator of that. So, two things. I'll do a first shall be last and the last shall be first type of thing. So a while back, somebody mentioned to watch this movie called Before the Wrath. Before the Wrath. And it's we got it on Apple TV, so you're just gonna have to figure it out and try to find it. It's absolutely wonderful, and the cool thing for me was, so thank you whoever referred us to that, and it took some time for us to have the time to, to do it, and it cost us like $4 or $5 to rent it, and it was absolutely fantastic for me personally, because the video we did a couple of videos ago with Sue and we talked about the wedding feast, and we talked about the wedding in Cana being a type or teaching us about the wedding, the parable of the 10 virgins, right? Well, this did it too, and much better than I did. But the cool thing for me was I'd never seen this film, and just from reading and studying, I felt like these two things came together. And I even did a video on it a while back, which I mentioned, which was called Wine, Wedding, and Wonderful. And there's just so many good things, but I'm going to come back to that. So that'll be last. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is another individual mentioned a video I did, and I really didn't cover it very well. I did it quite a while ago, but it was on the proclamation from the Quorum of the 12 in 1845. 1845. So think of what had happened. The martyrdom hadn't even been a year old yet of Joseph and Hiram, and the Nauvoo temple hadn't even been completed yet. The saints were still in disarray, and here are these 12. So there's no first presidency at the time. They make this proclamation to all the kings of the world, the president of the United States of America, the governors of several states, and to the rulers and people of all nations, greetings. And it goes through, and it talks about the restoration of the gospel. And then at the bottom of the first page, it's quite a long proclamation. It's not a nice little, it says this about the restoration. Being established in these the last days for the restoration of all things spoken by the prophets since the world began, and in order to prepare the way for the coming of the Son of Man. Boom, there we have it. There we have it. The whole purpose of the restoration is to prepare for the coming of the Son of Man, the second coming, right? It goes on to say, and we, this is the top page 2, and you can go find this yourself. And we now bear witness that his coming is near at hand, and not many years hence. The nations and their kings shall see him coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. In order to meet this great event, there must needs be a preparation. Wow, preparation. Think of the 10 virgins, think of the preparation, right? The preparation. We're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk a lot more about preparation. We are preppers. We're preppers. And so was the Quorum of the 12 in 1845. And they were telling us how to be preppers. I'm just going to skim over some interesting things. So I went through most of, I'm going to keep studying this, but I went through a lot of the prophecies, if not all of them, hopefully all of them, that the 12 made in this proclamation. Here's one. We further testify that the Lord has appointed a holy city and temple to be built on this continent. Now, Listen to this very carefully. Again, the Kirtland Temple was not in their possession anymore. And really the full endowment hadn't been presented there. That temple was, in my opinion, was meant more for the restoration of priesthood keys. And a lot of just amazing things happened there. Visitations, priesthood keys bestowed, validation of their effort, and a real gathering place. And in a lot of ways, it fulfilled the promises made of the temple that should have been built in Jackson County, if you read those carefully. So now they have an incomplete temple in Nauvoo. Okay? And yet they're making this prophecy. Now listen to this. We further testify that the Lord has appointed a holy city and temple to be built on this continent. Isn't that interesting? This continent. For the endowment and ordinances pertaining to the priesthood, and for the Gentile and the remnant of Israel to resort unto, resort, we think of it as a vacation, but it's refuge. It's a place to obtain a promise and comfort and peace, right? Resort unto, in order to worship the Lord and to be taught in his ways and walk in his paths. In short, to finish their preparations for the coming of the Lord. Finish their preparations. There it is again. Finish the preparations. Now, has that been fulfilled? Has that prophecy been fulfilled? Was there a holy city and a temple built on this continent where endowment and ordinance pertaining to the priesthood? Hello, yes, yes. Over and over and over and over and over again. Temples dot this continent, and those ordinances pertaining to the priesthood, they have been established, okay? And you could even say a holy city, because a holy city is holy because it has enough saints to justify a temple. Becomes holy. And we further testify the Jews among all nations hereby commanded in the name of the Messiah to prepare to return to Jerusalem in Palestine. Check that one off too. Check it off your list. Now here's one you can't check off. Oh, excuse me, I'll get to that. To rebuild that city, the Jerusalem. Check it off. It's a beautiful city. And temple unto the Lord. Ooh, can't check that one off yet. But see where we're going with this? For be it known unto you that the only salvation which remains for the Gentiles is for them to be identified in the same covenant and to worship at the same altar with Israel. Oh, I love that. These guys really knew their Old Testament, and they knew about the covenant. They had studied. One thing that I think we miss out on. And then it goes through a bunch of things, giving counsel to all these people. Hey, you got to help the cause. You got to help the cause. And then it says, talking about the remnant of Joseph, purify, exalt, glorify them as the sons and daughters of the royal house of Israel and of Joseph, who are making ready for the coming of the bridegroom. The coming of the bridegroom. This is what we're going to talk about with this movie, Before the Wrath. Before the Wrath. Okay, so I'm going to go over here. A great and glorious and mighty work is yet to be achieved in spreading the truth and kingdom among the Gentiles, in restoring, organizing, instructing, and establishing the Jews, in gathering, instructing, relieving, civilizing, educating, administering salvation to the remnant of Israel on this continent, in building Jerusalem in Palestine, and now get this, and the cities, stakes, temples, and sanctuaries of Zion in America, in gathering the Gentiles into the same covenant and organization, instructing them in all things for their sanctification and preparation, that the whole church of the saints, both the Gentile, the Jew, and Israel, may be prepared as a bride for the coming of the Lord. These things have happened. You notice it says cities, stakes, temples, sanctuaries of Zion. They hadn't even got a temple yet. And yet they're talking about temples and stakes. Okay? They're probably in their most down cycle of progressing and enjoying all the blessings of the gospel. Joseph and Hiram been killed. The church is in somewhat disarray. They know that they have to leave, but they want to finish the temple. All these things are happening to them, and yet they're boldly proclaiming that these things are going to happen, and they have happened. Then it goes through and says, if you're not going to be really part of this movement, at least help with it. And it gives some examples. Some will act the part of the venerable Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, or the noble Cyrus. We've talked about Cyrus. And will aid and bless the people of God. Or like Ruth, the Moabitess, will forsake their people and their kindred and country, and will say to the saints or to Israel, which I love that, because it says this group here and this group here, the saints or to Israel, this people shall be my people, and their God, my God. I would say put Donald J. Trump on that list right now. He's not this perfect, polished guy that can sit up and make these beautiful, warm and fuzzy speeches, but what he can do is bless us, and bless us as a nation with freedom, protecting the unborn, blessing Israel. I will bless those that bless Israel. I will curse them that curse Israel. And he definitely was a blessing. And he brought blessings to this country because of his attitude and his actions towards Israel, in my opinion. Okay, so we have that. That's really interesting in here. To such an extreme will the great division finally extend that the nations of the old world will combine to oppose these things by military force. They will send a great army of Palestine against the Jews, and they will besiege their city and will reduce the inhabitants of Jerusalem to the greatest extreme of distress and misery. These are the prophecies. And let me tell you, folks, these things are aligning. These things are aligning to happen. Even the United Nations, all nations, really pretty much are against Israel. If you look at what they vote on and what they speak about, it's almost always against Israel. Always against Israel. But if you think of Hezbollah to the south, so you have Syria. So I've mentioned this before, I believe, but the faction, the military force from Russia that was in Syria, they left. And guess who replaced them? Iranian forces. Yeah, it's pretty scary. And there's a big military buildup in northern Israel to protect them from both the Hezbollah and those, and most of them are supported by Iran, but the forces that hate Israel. And they border, so you have Lebanon to the north and west, and Syria to the north and east of Israel, and in both cases you've got these factions that want to wipe out Israel, and then you have countries aligning with that, and then from the south you have Hamas who've assembled thousands and thousands of missiles, okay, all to attack Israel. In that day, the Lord will pour upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. They shall look upon the Messiah whom they have pierced. This is the great conversion, okay? The Jews as a nation become holy from that day forward. There's just so many wonderful things. Or in other words, okay, now it talks about America. It kind of goes back and forth in this documentary. It talks about what's going to happen in Israel, and it's going to talk about what's going to happen in the Americas. Or in other words, he will assemble the natives and remnants of Joseph in America and make them a great and strong and powerful nation, and he will civilize and enlighten them and will establish a holy city and temple and the seat of government among them, which shall be called Zion. Now you could say that hasn't happened yet. I say it has. A holy city, a temple. You could say, well, they don't really have a seat of government. You know, it's interesting when you do a little bit of traveling, isn't the gospel really basically the same everywhere you go? And if you have a temple and you have a group of people, there's a sense of unity and belonging no matter what the borders say, because of that entity, which is in a sense a government, in my opinion. And there shall be his tabernacle, his sanctuary, his throne, his seat of government for the whole continent of North and South America forever. In short, it will be the Western Hemisphere, what Jerusalem will be to the Eastern. Now, this is talking about the future. This is talking about when Christ is reigning, right? But get that. Have you heard mention yet in any of this Jackson County? Now, I'm not saying that might not be the center, but it doesn't have to be, in my opinion, because in short, it will be the Western Hemisphere, what Jerusalem will be to the Eastern. And it will be a government which will include the continent of North and South America forever. Okay? So forget just the United States. And in this day, if you look it up, North and South America, there was no Central America. So it was just the Western Hemisphere. In fact, it says that. In short, it will be the Western Hemisphere. So it's the new world, right? So I think it's time to get past this idea that everything is just contained within the United States. The center will be here. But it goes out, and the influence is the same. And not everyone has to come to headquarters. How many of us live in Salt Lake right now? Okay. To this city and to several branches or stakes shall the Gentiles seek, as a standard of light and knowledge. Yea, the nations and their kings and nobles shall say, come, and let us go up to the Mount Zion, and to the temple of the Lord, where his holy priesthood stand to minister continually before the Lord, and where we may be instructed more fully and receive the ordinances of remission and of sanctification and redemption, and thus be adopted into the family of Israel and identified in the same covenants of promise. That's happened. If you've gone through the temple and the temple's gone through you, that prophecy is fulfilled. Okay? He shall then be ordained, washed, and anointed with holy oil, and their city's sanctuary become holy. There also the Messiah established his throne and seat of government. Jerusalem then becomes the seat of empire and the great center and capital of the old world. And then we had that clarified even more by President Nelson last April, and I've mentioned this, where Christ his headquarters will be in Jerusalem. Okay. There's just so many good things, and I gotta cut this short, but this part, I just highly recommend it. These are some of their last statements are just so powerful. It says this. He has also said that if they do not repent and come to the knowledge of the truth and cease to fight against Zion, and also put away all murder, lying, pride, priestcraft, whoredoms, and secret abomination, they shall soon perish from the earth and be cast down to hell, and we know it. They end everything with we know it. He has said that the time is at hand for the Jews to be gathered to Jerusalem, and we know it. Okay, and it goes on and on. Listen to the 10 tribes one. This is really interesting. He has said that the 10 tribes of Israel should be revealed in the north country, together with their oracles and records preparatory to their return and to their union with Judah, no more to be separated, and we know it. So I've heard a lot of people say that the 10 tribes are going to come to the New Jerusalem. No, they're going to be reunited with their brethren, the Jews. They were the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom. Judah and Benjamin were the southern kingdom. And you know what? In my opinion, that's happening and is going to continue to happen. They have their records with them. They've been sought out. I'm of the tribe of Ephraim. That's part of the 10 tribes. Go figure, right? Okay. So that's that. It's just powerful, just powerful. And if you really look at it honestly, you'll say, in my opinion, you'll say that a lot of these things have been fulfilled. Okay. So now I just want to finish with this this idea of the wedding. Now, this movie, Before the Wrath, it really specifies the difference between well, you have a Jewish wedding, but then there's even more specific, a Galilean wedding. Now, this is what I found in this movie, that 2/3 of all the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 2/3 of those took place in Galilee. What does that remind you of? As soon as I heard that, I said, that's really similar to the Doctrine and Covenants. 2/3 of the Doctrine and Covenants took place in Kirtland, or the surrounding areas of Kirtland. Isn't that interesting? And that's where the 12 apostles were called to go throughout the world. Galilee is where the 12 apostles came from. Galilee is where we have all these wonderful teachings. Kirtland. So Kirtland is the Galilee of the restoration. I haven't heard that before, so it's probably been said 1,000 times. I've just missed it. But Kirtland being the Galilee, so you start looking at the similarities between Kirtland and Galilee and the things that happen. Think of section 84, 88, 93, 133, all these wonderful, just mind-expanding, spirit-felt scriptures that we have all came out of Kirtland. Well, one was, I think, Hiram, Ohio, maybe 133, but that same general area, right? And if you've ever been there, you'll feel the spirit of Kirtland. I've been there a couple of times, and it's just so powerful, right? So anyway, back to the wedding. The wedding is very interesting, a Galilean wedding, because the bride, first off, there's a proposal, and there's a cup of wine from the potential groom to the potential bride. And she can take it, but she can give it back to him without drinking and say, I either am not ready or I don't want to marry you. And it's okay. But if she takes it and drinks, then they're betrothed, they're connected, they're engaged. And think of that word engaged, right? But then they separate for a year. They separate for a year or thereabouts. And this is where it really gets interesting, because the groom will go away and he'll start building a home, preparing. And quite often it's attached or built upon his father's home, right? This is all in the film. This isn't from me. This is such good stuff. I'm so glad it was recommended. So while he's praying, then the potential bride, the bride is preparing. She's making her wedding dress. She's getting things ready. She's learning how to be a wife and a mother and all those things. And she has bridesmaids. And you know who the only one who knows when the groom gets to go call for his bride? The father of the groom. The father. The father's the one that determines, okay, it's time for you to go pick up your bride. And he calls her to come out. Now you start making the connection between the wedding, a real Galilean wedding, and what Christ was teaching. These apostles knew exactly what he was talking about when he's teaching the parable of the 10 virgins. And then also think of the sacrament. Also think of the sacrament. I go to prepare a place for you. I'm the groom. I'm going to prepare a place for the bride. But I'm going to come back. Now, when the father of the groom says, okay, today's the day, tonight's the night. Now think of the parable of the 10 virgins. They had to trim their lamps and have oil, which means he's coming not only as a thief in the night, but coming in the night. He's actually coming in the night. That's why they have their lamps. And that's when people are least expecting. That's when they're slumbering. It's a huge metaphor and very symbolic, but probably in reality, based in reality. So the groom, based on his father saying, okay, now's the time, he comes with his entourage and he comes to the house of the bride and he blows his shofar horn, wakes everybody up. He's here. And guess what? She has been so ready. She's been sleeping in her wedding dress, not knowing the night, not knowing when, but being prepared. And her bridesmaids, same thing. They're all patiently looking forward to it, sleeping in their clothes so they can immediately come out and meet the groom. You see the symbolism here? This is so fantastic. This is so powerful. So she comes out, he's there, and she's actually lifted up and put on a cart thing, or not a cart, but the things like you would see the Egyptians, where the big muscle guys are carrying the royalty in it. She's basically royalty at that point. And she's carried to his home. The wedding feast begins. The wedding feast, and it lasts forever. And once the guests and people are in, the door is shut. And those that aren't ready, those that haven't put on the garment and been ready, think of the question, do you wear the garment both night and day? This is all about the wedding and the marriage. This is about the parable of the 10 virgins. And I mentioned this before in a video that perhaps, I'm not saying I don't know everything, but perhaps the parable of the 10 virgins is more a parable about the quickening, if you will. I know some people don't like to hear the word rapture, but when the door is shut, the party begins. The party begins. And no one else is allowed. And then you think of how significant the wine was in Cana, the wedding in Cana, how significant that was. And think of the wine in the Last Supper. Yeah. You see how these things are connected? And you see why marriage is such an important thing and why we don't want to mock a marriage covenant? Because it mirrors the marriage of Christ to his church. Yeah. So these are just some insights. I've gone way too long. I love you all. Watch that movie. I got it on Apple TV. Before the Wrath. It's a documentary / movie. There's like movie type scenes and then people talking about the Galilean wedding and how it all comes in. And I'll tell you, it made me feel pretty good that I was on the right track because I really felt the Spirit watching this. And independent of that, I had made a connection. And it's just from studying. It's just from studying. And so and you guys have had this happen to you, when something like that is validated or there's a second witness or a third witness, you go, oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy I'm not out there just thinking these things, Anyway, we're in it, folks. We are in it. We are in it. And when I say in it, we're in that very last preparatory stage of getting ready to meet the Lord. And we need to be ready. We need to be prepared. We need to have the wedding garment on and sleeping in it. and be so prepared spiritually and temporally and any other way we can that we, when we hear the shofar horn, we immediately go out and meet the groom, Jesus Christ. Love y'all. Bye.